Now on Talking Solutions, want to welcome into the studio John Henry and Annette Logan Parker. We're going to talk about transitioning veterans. John Henry, what is transitioning veterans?
Well, it's an audiobook. The full title is Transitioning Veterans, How We Get in Our Own Way and What to Do About It. That's designed pretty much for veterans who don't want to go talk to counselors. They don't want to ask for help. Or it's for high-functioning veterans who really can't ask for help because of their concern about losing security clearances and employment opportunities, so they kind of suffer in silence. So this is a personal development approach to a pretty serious subject that allows people to kind of look outside of the internal dialogue that they have going on around what they have witnessed, what's happened to them in war, what's happened to them in the military, and all of a sudden they find themselves home. They need to think differently. And there's a huge void that's going on around their identity where they haven't been prepared. They didn't get a class on an identity crisis that they're going to go through when they separate from service. So it's really a personal development approach to dealing with triggers, trauma, the critical mind, and it allows you to really look at how to recreate identity, mission, meaning, and purpose in your life.
I was so interested, John Henry, when I heard about Transitioning Veterans, this audiobook, from Annette Logan Parker, who also is in studio with us, because we have such an interest in pursuing issues and solutions for our veterans. We owe them so much. And here in Southern Nevada, we all know we've got a tremendous population of both active and retired military, and we value them so much and want to make sure that their issues are addressed. When I heard about transitioning veterans, I was like, oh yeah, we need to talk about this. We have had on Talking Solutions a lot of different approaches to help our veterans, and I wanted to absolutely hear about yours. Annette, how did you find out about the book so that you could tell me?
Well, I watched John Henry write it and participated in a few of the edits. Oftentimes, I think I was one of his biggest cheerleaders in helping him complete the project. I myself was a military spouse, and the subject matter is important not just for the transitioning veterans, but for their family and the people who love veterans. The book really helped me understand a lot of what I was going through back in the day and what my ex-husband was going through as he was transitioning from the Air Force to civilian life. So I really feel that the book is critically important for anybody who knows and loves a veteran, which I think pretty much every American knows and loves a veteran.
Absolutely. And you also had the perspective, Annette, from the spouse. There are so many changes. Got a niece back in Nebraska, and her husband, they were so young when they got married. After 9/11, as many people did, he felt the desire to get into the military. He went to Iraq, came home. He was a different individual after his experience. Their marriage fell apart very soon after, which is not uncommon. We've talked with our Southern Nevada BA about the issues that happen between spouses, within families, with returning veterans. And it's really easy to understand with everything that they experience and all the things that they go through when they are deployed. They come back home. To have issues is so understandable. I would think we would all welcome the opportunity to give them whatever help is needed. But like you mentioned, John Henry, military veterans coming back home, there is a lot of reluctance. They don't want to do it for so many understandable reasons. I watched your 5-minute video yesterday. We will have the link on our Talking Solutions Facebook page along with a podcast of our discussion today. That 5-minute video was so great. It outlined a lot of the reasons why veterans would be reluctant to pursue some help, even though, like we just mentioned, there can be a lot of problems within the family, problems within themselves after they come back home. But you've given them a way to get assistance, or anyone in the family, or like you said, Annette, anyone who loves a veteran to understand, and you've given them this special way to do it.
Yeah, it's really designed for people to listen to in the privacy of their own mind. They don't have to tell anybody they're getting help, but it's specifically going at the issues that most veterans are struggling with. And the spouses and the family members and the parents and the grandparents, they're desperate to understand. They have no idea in many cases what to do. This helps them understand when they go to restaurants what's going on for a veteran who is uncomfortable just being around crowds and where they need to sit. I mean, it really helps understand from a family point of view what not to do is as important as what to do. And when your veteran says thank you because he or she appreciates that you get that they need a certain level of awareness, being in crowds and groups in certain situations, they can relax and your relationship gets better. It really does help in a lot of ways for anybody. And veteran-friendly employers, they don't really have a lot of mentoring or peer support programs to help them understand how to onboard vets. And veterans are trained to be impeccable. They're trained to get the job done, not to tell you they got a boo-boo or something hurts. They just go get it done. And so they don't self-promote really well. They're well-behaved most of the time when they're in the business environment, and in the home environment, all you really ever hear is I'm fine, which is kind of a buzzword for I'm not. Typically, there's something going on. That's why people are asking, what's going on? How are you? Do you need something? No, I'm fine. So they don't really disclose a whole lot. So this is really designed to kind of lighten up a very serious subject. And I have a second person that actually co-narrated with me. His name's Yonel. He's a combat rescue helicopter pilot that's been in 4 of the 5 branches. And he's a real tough guy from New York. And I wanted to find somebody to play the role of the critical mind that we all seem to have, especially veterans who are always catastrophizing things, or what's wrong with this picture, or who are you? What do you want? There's just this general standoffishness that I wanted to present in this body of work without saying, hey, you're screwed up. It's saying, isn't this crazy? The mind chatter that goes on for the average person who doesn't have military or combat experience, it's bad enough when your mind's telling you you're not good enough or you can't do something or watch out. But you combine that with people who have been shot at and had to go do some difficult things, and that critical mind has really been given the order by you, whether you remember it or not, to take over and get you out of danger and get you home, but only you can issue the order for it to stand down. And that's a real key distinction I think a lot of veterans don't really get until they can really understand that, wow, I do have a critical mind, and I also have a rational, more reasonable mind. And that's what the duality is in this narration, is we're bringing attention to the crazy conversations and the energy that goes out towards managing the stress and anxiety of being hypervigilant and traumatized in many cases.
I can't imagine. I haven't done military service, but that's what's great about transitioning veterans, John Henry, is I can understand it better. When Annette told me about this audiobook, this show is all about shining a light, raising awareness, because I believe that when we understand each other better, it promotes empathy, and in the long run, we're all nicer to each other. Mm-hmm. And the employers that you just referred to a moment ago about how they don't really get it, it's not that they don't want to.
Oh, they want to.
That's what I see in military families who also serve, military families, military spouses, coworkers, neighbors, friends, those of us who want to understand our military because we understand how much we owe them. So we want things to be right for them. And this audiobook really is suitable for a lot of people.
I've talked to Korean War veterans, Vietnam veterans, some World War II veterans that are still here, and first Gulf War vets, Grenada vets, Panama vets. They wish they would have had something like this when they were getting out. And even people who hadn't deployed or even served in a combat environment, you still have the indoctrination being institutionalized for a period of your life where you get 3 hots and a cot, you get the camaraderie, you get identity, you get mission every day. You're told what you need to do, and you have meaning and purpose. And when all that's gone, it can really come down like an avalanche. It has a cascading effect where you don't know what's missing, but all you know is there is a huge void you can't fill up with adrenaline seeking or alcohol or drugs or sex or workaholism. So what we want to do is bring attention to this identity crisis. I keep bringing that to the forefront because that's truly what's missing for the pre-separation program. That's why my son and I were creating this body of work for so many years. There's a program called TAPS, Transition Assistance Programs. And there's different transition assistant programs that are getting a lot better, but what they don't address is the identity crisis. And that's the biggest challenge that I see. Like 22 veterans a day are dying from suicide.
Yes.
I don't mention that one time in the audiobook because I don't want to focus on somebody saying that's a possibility. I want to focus on a strength-based approach. If you find yourself in a hole, you should stop digging. That's the first thing. And we just want to wake them up to a new way of thinking to interrupt their pattern. Because since before Homer wrote the Iliad like 2,600 years ago, warriors have gone to war. Families have waited for them to get home. This is not a new phenomenon. We should know better. We should have gotten this right a long time ago about how to transition people from being institutionalized in the military to a new identity. We should be helping them go through a process of recreating a sense of who they are and who they're becoming. That's really a big void that's missing. So that's what this book was created for. It's designed to inspire people to think differently and to give them some real tools. Like there's a 3-step process for how to deal with triggers and trauma and the critical mind and how to take control back of your rational self. That critical mind will still be there if you happen to be in severe danger, but it doesn't have to live in the forefront of your life, drive people crazy around you and drive yourself into your familiar cave where you just want to hole up and have people leave you alone. It's making a huge difference. But the whole thing is created from real experiences with real warriors and real families over the last 18 years. So it's really a body of work that came together as a result of some family tragedy and generational understanding of PTSD and homecoming. My dad was a combat vet in Korea in the Marine Corps, and then he went in the Air Force. He was a reconnaissance photographer and got shot down with his pilot, had to evade capture. I never knew why he couldn't get in the pool.
There's a story. My husband, his father was a World War II Navy pilot. His dad, along with a lot of other veterans upon return, don't really want to talk about their experiences. They don't want to sit down and relive that and rehash it with you.
Yeah.
And as a result, we don't understand.
Well, that was my dad. He was extremely violent to everybody. And he would never talk about it. If Korea or Vietnam came up on the TV, he'd just leave the room. And after my mom passed away and he remarried, he would tell her everything, but she couldn't share anything with me until after he was gone. He made his wife promise, so I never knew he got shot down. I never really knew anything about his military experience, but I knew his violence. I knew he was out of control. You know, my son went in the military. I went in the Marine Corps. I served, fortunately, during a time of peace in a great unit. My son did 2 tours in Afghanistan with the 10th Mountain Division. He was a squad leader. He saw a lot of combat. And so many of the things that are in the audiobook are biographical in nature, just from upbringing and the familiarity of being around this craziness. And then my own separation being really difficult, coming back to the civilian world. And then my son having like a train wreck coming home.
That's got to be hard to watch, even though you've got the military knowledge and your own experiences, to see that in your child.
Right.
Upon return.
He called me on November 3rd of 2003 and said, I am too effed up to come home. It was on a satellite phone, and I hadn't heard from him in maybe 5 months. You know, it's crazy.
That would be so hard as a parent to hear. How do you fix that? Every parent wants to fix what's wrong.
Well, yeah. If your kid is sick or they have some kind of illness, you become an expert at that illness. Every parent does, right? And so I just said, first of all, get home alive, and then we'll figure it out.
Was that what motivated you to come up with Transitioning Veterans, the audiobook?
Yeah, I didn't know it at the time that it would result in this. My main concern was finding him counseling, and I went to a vet center, which is a great place for vets and their families to get counseling. They don't share information with the VA, but they've got a really good network of maybe 250 of these storefront locations where they give counseling to vets, and vets feel safe. They do circle groups of vets of the same era, the same conflict, so you feel there's something relatable about it. So that's the first place I went, and the site director, this is in 2003, he just said, look, we are pretty jammed up with just the existing flow of Vietnam vets and First Gulf War vets, and we haven't even seen the waves of the deployed vets coming home on the near horizon. You know, they're a lot better now. They really have a huge amount of workload that they manage. But he said to me, I'm sorry, but even if your son's suicidal, we might only be able to see him once a month at present. We're just really booked up. And so I kind of went nuts as a parent and said, you know, something's got to be done here. This is ridiculous. And it threw me into this path. I had a pretty successful consulting business. I'm a behavioral assessment analyst. I do a lot of work with companies and leaders and stuff. I just called some of my consultant friends and said, I'm going to be gone for a while. I don't know when I'm coming back. And I just delved into this like a freaked out parent. And I have a background in the personal development field. I work for a lot of best-selling authors in the personal development field and transformational development field. So I approach this from how can we take a different approach instead of a, hey, dude, you need to get some counseling approach, because that doesn't work. That just pisses them off and they go even deeper in their cave. So what my son Danny and I were developing are these concepts about what conversations really happen, you know, what's really going on. And we were able to distill it down into some really powerful distinctions we have to look at and overcome in order to move forward. I'm happy to share some of those concepts. That's really what it is. Having this be accessible from a conversation with people where their defenses aren't way up.
It's non-threatening.
It's non-threatening. And the thing is, set anything aside that doesn't serve you right now. And the whole nature, I even say it right there up front, is that at some point, your critical mind is going to call BS on something I'm saying or the way I'm saying it. And it's going to say, this guy's an idiot. Don't listen to this anymore. Matter of fact, just turn it off right now. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. I had one vet, because Yonel, the co-narrator, he's from New York. He's got this real strong Brooklyn accent. And this guy, he says, I don't like that New York taxi cab driver guy you got narrating it with you. I said, really? Say more about that. And he's like, I just don't respond to that kind of tone. Notice that's your critical mind telling you to turn this thing off. I even said it right there in the beginning. Do you remember that? He said, oh yeah, I remember that. Well, that's your critical mind saying, I don't like the way this guy sounds, so therefore I'm going to discount everything in the audiobook. And as soon as he heard that, he started chuckling because he said, man, that's what I do. That's my critical mind.
Mm-hmm.
So first thing is we help them recognize that they have a critical mind and they also have a more rational, reasonable mind.
We're talking with John Henry about the audiobook Transitioning Veterans here on Talking Solutions. This is so interesting. I mentioned earlier that there is a 5-minute audio preview introduction to let you know what this is all about. And I sampled that yesterday and just absolutely blown away. It is so positive. It makes so much sense. And when you refer in that 5-minute presentation about the fact that a veteran who's returning may be reluctant, even though they need some of this to help them get over these rough patches coming back home, they are heroes, but they don't want to be seen as weak. So they go, well, then I can't go get help because that's a weakness.
It's a stigma.
It shouldn't be, but it is. But you found a way to help assist these people without making them go through the traditional ways of openly pursuing mental health services, which are more available than ever through groups like the VA. But this is a comfortable, safe way to wade into it and go, okay, all right, this feels good so far. And yes, I would be nervous with my employer letting them know that I am accessing these mental health services, but by using the audiobook Transitioning Veterans, that doesn't even have to be an issue.
No, it has to be relatable. It has to be easily accessible, and people don't have to know you're getting help. People don't have to know you're learning about yourself. There's no rule book on how to do this. Danny and I just took the best approach we could to figure out what would work for us. And some processes that we developed over a number of years that really helped me with my PTSD from a lot of life experiences, dealing with my hypervigilance, my triggers, my rage, and the things that would get me going and the time I would occupy just stressing out and, fretting about things. My son came back with the same thing, but even worse. So we developed a process for recognizing when we're triggered more quickly, because if we don't recognize we're triggered, it could be days, it could be hours at least, where hours later we're still driving around obsessing about how we wanted to pull somebody out of their car window because they flipped us off and cut us off. And all of a sudden we wake up a few hours later and we're like, oh man, that got me really triggered. Well, what would happen if you could recognize that in nanoseconds? If you could train yourself to have a ricochet trigger where instantly when you feel the body sensations or you recognize that familiar dialogue, that you could pull yourself out of it. And what happens when you start retraining your reaction, when you actually had bad experiences, most every veteran, it actually happened. This is real. It's not going to go away. However, you can manage your sanity by recognizing you're triggered more quickly. And when you do, the episode gets shorter in length and it gets shallower in its depth, and it takes up less space. And then sooner or later, you start noticing that you're not as triggered as often. And when you are, it's not for very long. And that huge episode where it might have felt like you jump on a raft and go downstream for however long it takes for it to come back to shore, now you have a sense of choice. Big problem when vets get triggered, or anybody who's had trauma, is they start self-medicating with coffee, with cigarettes, with drinking. Whatever it is, it's all self-medicating to avoid the moment because they don't know how to deal with the moment. Well, this process shows you how to shorten and shallow the episode that you typically would have. And by having that be more manageable, it becomes like a little blip on your radar instead of a full-blown episode. You start having triggers that are fewer and farther in between, and it becomes recognizable within days, if not weeks. And the quality of your life resides between your triggers. But if you're walking around traumatized all the time and you're walking on always edgy and triggered, you wouldn't know that. I didn't. It's like asking a fish, what's the water like? It would say, what do you mean? What's water? They're in it.
It's my existence.
Yeah, I'm familiar with this. I don't know what you're talking about. Most people find themselves triggered so often that they live there.
This sounds like such a healthy audiobook because I don't know too many people who are so balanced mentally in everything that they do that this couldn't help them regardless of whether or not they are a veteran.
virtually every person that's listened to it that's not a vet says, man, these principles apply to me. I had a pretty bad situation here or there, and they start sharing how this has got their attention. The first step is to recognize that you're triggered more quickly. So you shorten and shallow what would be a big old episode. The second thing is recognizing that you're ruminating. You're cycling up in your head and you're not breathing. Oxygen is the antidote for anxiety. So step 2 is a process called tactical breathing, where you breathe in and out through your nose. You breathe in for a count of 5. You hold for a count of 5. You exhale for a count of 5. And you hold for a count of 5. And after 2 or 3 times of doing that, you feel your blood pressure drop. You feel yourself relaxing and you feel your resources opening up. That's step 2. And then step 3 is shift the focus of your attention. And so we demonstrate a process of how to create a resource state. In this example in the audio, it's Yonel's first experience with his baby daughter, looking at her in the eyes when she was born and noticing that she's staring back at him. It was a magical moment where he went from this hardcore vet to a place of joy. And he remembered that's probably the only time he's ever had joy in his life. That's a good place to go when you're triggered. So this is a process that my son and I developed. It worked really well for me. It worked really well for him. And then the more people we shared this with, the more feedback we got that it was very helpful.
It's healthy. It's positive. It's moving in the right direction. When I watched the 5-minute presentation, big fan because of our vets and their needs, but overall health, because I keep going back to the fact that I believe our big problems in this country are rooted in mental health, school shootings, a lot of different violent episodes, all kinds of stuff really could be eliminated or reduced substantially by dealing with some mental health issues. And that's the kind of healthy approach that you're talking about with the audiobook, Transitioning Veterans.
But we use a managing triggers scale in the initial part of it, to where you're looking at the intensity and the duration of your triggers and about how long does it take you to recognize from when you're triggered to the actual event. Like it might be a minute, might be 3 hours, might be a couple of days. This becomes important when you start looking at cutting down the time you spend in your episodes. And eventually, after a little bit of practice and you get the process down, we flip it from an intensity of triggers scale to a quality of life scale. Now you're not just living in the managing anymore either. Like I can tell you, I have had symptoms my whole life growing up that really never come back anymore. I don't have to deal with them. I don't have to think about them. I don't lose any sleep about them. And a lot of the vets that I've worked with over the years can attest to the same thing. Their life got easier. Their life got more manageable, but they had to take charge of their life. They had to take charge of their thinking, and they had to realize that only they can issue the order for their critical mind to stand down, take a seat, if necessary, tell it to shut the hell up and let you get on with your life. And things happen. Things happen positively, and you start being at choice instead of being at the effect of your triggers.
Transitioning Veterans, it's an audio book.
Annette finally just said, you got to stop talking about writing this book. You got to sit down and just start doing it. We'll take care of the home front for however long it takes, but just check this box. You got to get it done. And so for about a good year, many days she would come home and I'd still been in my robe acting like I'm writing, and it was a very challenging time to figure out how to do this, but I had the right mission, I had the right purpose. And Danny and I had worked through so much of this stuff that I had plenty of content and plenty of concepts. I just had to order it up in the right way. It took me about a year and a half to really finish it up in the draft. It took 49 final drafts to get it where it is. And then it took me about 6 months of recording. And then I spent a lot of time trying to find the perfect voice actor to do it. And everybody kept telling me I needed to do it because I understood the subject matter, but I didn't like my voice because I didn't sound like one of the audiobook people that I listened to.
I live with Audible on the way home every day.
I do too. And I kept trying to sound like somebody I wasn't. And finally, my good friend John McLean from Dog and Pony Studios here locally, his dad was a career Marine. John's a great voice coach. He kept recording what I was doing in his studio, and he's like, well, what are you really trying to say? I said, well, this is what I want to say. I would just have a whole different way of being. He said, well, why don't you just say it like that? And I'll record it and we'll see what it sounds like. And then like a golfer's perfect swing, I found what worked for me. And I didn't have to be concerned about being somebody I'm not. So it took a lot to go through this. Most of it's really derived from my experiences with Danny and my dad and myself and just hundreds of other vets and their families that were good enough to share their struggles. And we haven't lost one vet that we've worked with in 17 years.
That's huge.
Yeah. I hope it doesn't happen. It's been close.
We've talked already about suicide among veterans, which we all agree is unacceptable. Our heroes don't have to go through this. Now you've got a solution to help.
Well, it's a direct approach to a severe problem. And what I discovered is I can't do the work one-on-one with people. I'm not going to be able to hit the numbers of people that really need the help. So by recording something, it takes on a life of its own, and I wanted to make sure it's the best I could do. And it is, I could beat it to death, but eventually you got to do a design freeze and you got to go to market, and I priced it as cheap as the iTunes store would let me price it. It's like $4.95. So any vet who doesn't have a lot of money can get access to it. But mostly what I'm doing is this is more of a legacy project for my son. I've been donating it to nonprofits that I really believe in for the vets that they're serving. And I've been using it to train peer mentors and peer support people inside nonprofits so they can help veteran to veteran and create like audiobook study groups. So it's propagating really well amongst nonprofits, amongst like Student Veterans of America, the UNLV group here in town. A lot of vets are really into it. I've become good friends with them. There's a great organization called Merging Vets and Players. They bring former professional athletes and transitioning vets together once a week over at Extreme Couture. Like at 5:30, they have a free workout. But if you don't want to do the workout, or you're injured, or you just don't want to do that, you can just come to the circle group at 6:30 to 7:30. We just sit down and talk confidentially about transition. And I've been taking a bunch of them through this work. I've been going there about a year now, and it's made a huge difference.
I've got to believe that the feedback that you've been getting, John Henry, on Transitioning Veterans, the audiobook, has been positive.
Yeah, I sent it to a former director of the National Center for PTSD, who I've known over the years. When I first called about my son, freaked out as a parent. He was a director. He listened to it, liked it, sent it on to the Cognitive Behavioral Therapy Group, and they thought, wow, this is really going to be helpful for treatment-resistant veterans is what they call them. And then I've been circulating it around to a lot of people, but mostly the ones that need the help the most are the ones who aren't asking for it. That's really the target audience. There's 22 veterans a day that are desperate. They're running out of hope. For them, I think it's just the end of suffering, and they don't know what to do. This can interrupt that pattern, and it can give them a different way to look at it. So the VA has got all these programs that are waiting for these vets. But if the ones who need the help the most are the ones who aren't asking for it or can't ask for it, and that's where the 22 a day is coming from, that's what this is targeted to go at directly.
It's Transitioning Veterans. I still say that this audiobook is not just for veterans. I appreciate it myself.
The thing that I really, really love about this book is it looks forward to the future. It doesn't look backwards to the past where the trauma is. And it's a short audiobook, an hour and 20 minutes long. It gets straight into the subject matter. A lot of books on the subject are almost textbooks on cognitive behavior and clinical psychology. And that's all a little heady for the person, those 22 veterans that John Henry speaks of. It's a very, very quick, effective, inexpensive solution to get right in there. That's what I think is great. It's less than a cup of Starbucks coffee, and there's an accompanying PDF that you can get from Harvesting Wisdom Publishing website that's a transition map and action plan that goes hand in hand with the book. And I think what's most impressive to me about the book is it's a how-to guide. Instead of a book that says, ain't it so sad, this is the problem, and we really don't know what to do about it, it's a book about how to interrupt that. Literally in an hour and 20 minutes, you can be taught how to take control of your life in a very positive, forward-looking manner. I haven't seen anything like that. And that's what I think is great.
I think knowledge is power. And I would think an hour and 20 minutes, that's not a lot of time to invest in an audiobook to give you power over these overwhelming feelings and compulsions that you have. Wow.
You can listen to it as often as you like, or just go to the parts that are most relevant. And then you can go to the self-study guide. If you go to transitioningveteransbook.com, you can actually listen to the whole book for free if you have internet access. Seriously not interested in making a bunch of money on this. This is a legacy project. I'd rather meet the people where they're at and not have to have them get online. Some people don't even want to put their information online. So go to transitioningveteransbook.com, listen to it, download the free self-study guide, and just start getting into it. Find a battle buddy. Find a couple of guys or gals that you can relate to. Listen to it with your spouse or your family member and go through this.
I would find this to be your legacy, your passion project. People are going to remember you for what you've come up with in the way of an answer for our returning veterans, to give tools to help. That is a huge gift.
It is. My son had 2 children. My grandchildren, I want them to know what kind of an impact their dad will continue to make generationally. I mean, veterans are living in such a world that they need to be perfect. and I hear this most often, is that if you're not perfect, people get hurt or they die. And you come home and you put that onto your family, your work, your leadership, people you work for, they're not impeccable enough as a leader. They don't know what real leadership is. Veterans have the world wired up to where they look, walk, and talk and act impeccably. They can't show any weakness, and that's a real challenge, and it can get in your way. So we talk about this need for perfectionism and that your brain gets stuck because it doesn't know what to do. It's cycling around and around and around. And I think the big key distinction here is that when you can admit that your mind is stuck and that you don't know what to do, that it doesn't know what to do, then by definition, it might be possible that you don't know what to do either. And it's hard enough to get a guy to ask for directions, let alone a combat.
We know about men and asking directions.
Yeah, let alone a combat vet to say, okay, I'll get some help. So really, when they can look at a series of key distinctions that are holding them back in their life and that are frustrating the people around them in their life that they care about. I mean, the whole bottom line of this work, save lives, keep families together. It doesn't get any simpler than that.
And what an honorable effort to try to help in that area. Transitioning Veterans is the audiobook that we're talking about. John Henry in the studio with us. One of the things that we do as part of Talking Solutions is we ask, what can we do to help you?
The vision of this work is that it propagates from veteran to veteran. If veterans aren't talking about it with other vets, it's irrelevant. I'm just another well-intending parent wanting to do a good job, you know? And there are tons of programs out there for the taking for these vets, but we got to get them interested. We got to get them engaged. We got to get them to reduce their consumption of substances so they can start thinking more clearly. Well, if you have the right strategy and you have the right reasons and you can recreate, like, what is my new identity? If you don't have a mission, if you don't have a goal, make your first goal finding a goal. And once you help them rethink about it, the most fascinating part to this whole thing is I come across vets all the time who are in the worst way. But when they realize that what's missing in that big void is identity, mission, meaning, and purpose, they start running towards transformation. I don't have to really do anything. They know what to do. When they get a goal, they're goal-setting machines. They know to go after it. So it's not about coddling them or telling them what to do. It's helping them wake up. So the more vets that are listening to this right now, the more family members that are listening to this right now, take what you can from it, pass it on, and you might not recommend the whole book. You might just say, hey, here's a chapter you should listen to. It's propagating just the way I had hoped. And this is the first interview that I've done in a year. I just wanted to let it do its work and test it and make sure that it's what I think it is and what I'm ready to kind of promote. But the videos really are designed to do the work. It doesn't require anybody to talk to me. I don't really want to do a bunch of interviews. I want the work to propagate.
Well, of course, we're going to have all the information, links, and everything on the Talking Solutions Facebook page, along with the podcast link, so that people can hear our discussion today.
I think if there were a way for us to package the message so that people can understand this isn't more of the same old ineffective stuff that we've been giving our veterans and families for decades, generations. It is different. And I think if we could somehow help the audience understand that everybody has an hour and 20 minutes to spare. It's free if you go to the right pathway to get it. That it's not the type of book where after listening to it, you have a greater understanding and awareness of the problem. And then you're asking yourself, great, so what do I do? I just know the problem better than I did before. This is a how-to guide, which is what I think is so critical. In an hour and 20 minutes, you can take 10 years worth of therapy work and make your car your therapy session, right? Do this in the privacy of your own car, in your own home, while you're at the gym, on the treadmill, whatever the case might be. It is definitely a how-to guide to gain control of your future.
And just understand yourself better.
And understand yourself better. And I can tell you that I'm not a traumatized person, and the book has helped me learn how to manage my triggers. I think I'm a better parent. I'm a better employer. I'm a better spouse and friend because I understand my triggers. And I'm not a traumatized combat vet. You brought up a really good point when you said this information is for everyone. You know, the target audience is the veteran because they're suffering, but a lot of people are suffering and they can gain the same tools from this body of work. It is valuable.
Triggers are real for anyone. Mm-hmm. In fact, we can take it down to the level of at home by yourself. What is the trigger that makes you go get the pint of ice cream out of the freezer and eat every last bite? Mm-hmm. Triggers are very common. Some of them are extremely dangerous, some of them less so. Mm-hmm. But if we understand ourselves well enough to know, that's a trigger, and you know the positive way to pull yourself away from that. Wow, I love that idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's about really taking control of your thinking. I'm writing the second book right now, which is the full title of this book is Transitioning Veterans, How We Get in Our Own Way and What to Do About It. So the target audience are transitioning veterans and their families. But the second book is simply How We Get in Our Own Way and What to Do About It for the average person. And it's, again, a personal development approach. You asked me what else might we be missing? What I'm in the process of scheduling and creating is a training here in Vegas. It's easy to get from anywhere to Vegas. So I'm going to start doing a series of trainings. I'm already teaching groups of peer advisors, peer mentors for different nonprofit groups how to use the audiobook, taking them through it one chapter at a time as a facilitator so they can go back and facilitate individual and group book studies and circle group conversations with people. So I'm going to create a 1 and a 2 day training for veteran-friendly employers, for other nonprofits to be able to send people out to. I'll probably do some stuff over the web. I'll probably record some stuff. But the real work here is you help somebody have a conversation like this and they see 100 or 200 people over their career that keeps propagating out. I think that's the ripple effect I'm looking for is, how to plant little oak trees with people. And what's really great about this, it's all built on a military skills transfer model that every vet understands. Learn it, teach it, master it. I deliver this as a Trojan horse because you should listen to us because you never know if you have a buddy that's in trouble, this might be really helpful. Little do they know when they're listening to it, they're like, man, this is talking about me. Like everything in this is like, this is my world. Then they start talking about it to other people. They start internalizing it and they start developing a sense of knowing around it. It helps them in their transition very quietly and subtly. And sometimes it smacks them right in the face like, wow, I can stop doing this now. Other times it's more subtle than that. But I think that's where this is going, helping more organizations build their competencies around how to have these conversations. Just because you've been there and done that doesn't mean you know how to have a transformational conversation. So this propagates best from vet to vet, family member to family member, but it gives them the principles and the tools and the conversation points, I think, that are most relevant. And then through repetition, you start noticing that you're triggered. And within a few days, a few weeks, you start noticing that you have a nice sense of ease instead of tension. And then you start handling the bigger triggers that get you, and those start ricocheting into a more positive effect. You still have the experiences. You're not going to avoid that, but you can dramatically shift the way you respond to your triggers instead of react. And that's really where this is going.
I think the effect of letting people know and someone tells someone else, shares the information with their group, it's an exponential kind of effect. You start with one and then it grows and it spreads.
I joke around a little bit about like when the special operations guys in the military started wearing Oakley sunglasses, right? Before they become standard issue, every broke private in the military found some way to be wearing a $150 pair of Oakleys, right? It's self-propagated like crazy. Yeah, that would be the vision of this work is like all of a sudden it taps into the right vein with the right credible people, which it's doing that. It's just a matter of time. But attacking this 22 veteran a day dilemma is directly the target, is to reduce that number. And even if this takes somebody who wants to write a book and says, I could do better than this guy, then it
take
serves
the
its
challenge.
purpose. Yeah, go write something. Create your own transitioning program. I went back to Montana to work with a group of vets and their wives a couple of weeks ago that are preparing to separate after a whole career in the military. These are senior staff NCOs. And I told them, I said, if you take one of these ideas out of this book, I'm going to be really pissed. But if you take it all, that's called research. You're a sergeant major, you're a leader.
Inspiration.
Yeah, people for years to come are going to be calling you and your wife from the family readiness unit saying, we're getting ready to separate out and we're scared to death. What do we do? Well, build your own transition program from this if you want, or use this as a module, but become an expert on transition. You're the senior staff NCO. They look at you to have the answers. So go get the answers. Here's some of them.
Audiobook, it's Transitioning Veterans. And as you mentioned, John Henry, the full title is How to Get Out of Your Own Way and What to Do About It.
Right.
It's available. We are going to share all the links, as we promised, on the Talking Solutions Facebook page, along with the link to the podcast. I'll be sharing our discussion with so many people, veterans in my family, other people who just could use the help, as you say, getting out of their own way, understanding the triggers, the switches that flip, and how to bring yourself back down and not end up in some kind of an escalated situation that nobody wants to be part of. There's an easier way to deal with it. And I love the fact that this can be done just through your earbuds. When you get a chance, don't have to share it with anybody. We'll have all the information on our Talking Solutions Facebook page. Annette Logan Parker, thank you for telling me about the book. And John Henry, thank you for sharing all this wonderful information with us today on Talking Solutions.
Thank you.
Thank you.